In the early morning darkness of Tampa, Florida, a 17-year-old girl rode her bicycle home after work. The streets were quiet. The city had settled into that still hour when porch lights glow softly, traffic thins out, and ordinary roads feel almost empty. She had taken this kind of ride before. It was not unusual to be tired. It was not unusual to want only to get home, close the door, and let the night finally end. But on this night, the road changed. A car appeared. A stranger stepped into her path, and in a few sudden moments, the familiar streets of Tampa disappeared from view. She did not know his name. She did not know that investigators had already been searching for answers in a wider pattern of violence across the area. She did not know how important her memory would become. But during the hours that followed, she did something extraordinary. She listened, she noticed, she remembered. She paid attention to turns in the road, the sound of traffic, the feeling of movement, the voice of the man who had taken her, and the details of the place where she was held. She was young. She was frightened. She was in danger. But she was not passive. Inside the darkness, she began building a map, not with paper, not with sight, but with memory. And when she finally came home, that memory would help investigators find the man responsible. Welcome back to the channel. Tonight's true crime story is the abduction of Lisa McVey, told in a calm, respectful, sleep-friendly style. This case involves a serious crime against a teenager, so we will handle it carefully. We will not describe the harm done to Lisa in graphic or unnecessary detail. Instead, this episode will focus on the verified timeline, Lisa's survival, the investigation that followed, and the careful observations that helped police identify Bobby Joe Long. This is not a story told for shock. It is a story about attention under pressure. It is a story about being heard. And it is a story about how one young survivor's memory helped change the direction of a major investigation. So settle in, let the room around you become quiet, and we will begin in Tampa, Florida, in November of 1984. Tampa in 1984 was a city of motion. There were bright commercial roads, quiet neighborhoods, late-night shifts, and long stretches of pavement where the city seemed to thin out after dark. In the daytime, Tampa could feel open and busy, with sunlight over shopping centers, traffic moving through wide roads, and people coming and going from work, school, restaurants, and homes. At night, the same places could feel different. The edges of the city softened, the roads grew quieter, and small details became more noticeable. The hum of a passing car, the buzz of a streetlight, the sound of a bicycle tire moving over pavement. By late 1984, Tampa and the surrounding area were also carrying another kind of quiet, a quiet concern. Several women had been found dead in the Tampa Bay region. Investigators were trying to determine whether the cases were connected. The crimes were spread across different places, and the full pattern had not yet been made clear to the public. People were uneasy, even if they did not know every detail. Police were working with fragments, timelines, descriptions, forensic evidence, locations, and the difficult task of connecting separate cases into one possible picture. At the center of that picture, though not yet fully identified to the public, was a man named Bobby Joe Long. Long had lived in Florida and moved through the Tampa area during the period when the crimes occurred. He was not someone Lisa McVey knew. He was not someone she expected to encounter. To her, on the night of November 3rd, 1984, he was simply a stranger who appeared suddenly and violently in her path. Lisa McVey was 17 years old. She was working late hours and trying to make her way through life. Later accounts of Lisa's childhood and home life describe serious hardship, but this story does not need to linger on private pain. What matters for this episode is that Lisa had already learned resilience before the night that made her name known. She was a teenager. She was tired. She was vulnerable, in the way anyone can be vulnerable when alone at night, simply trying to get home. But vulnerability is not the same thing as helplessness. That difference matters. Because when Lisa was taken, she did not have control over the situation. She could not choose where she was brought. She could not simply leave. She could not make the danger vanish. But she could still think. She could still listen. She could still notice. And in the middle of a terrifying situation, she began doing exactly that. She began collecting details.
Small details?
The kind that might seem ordinary in any other moment. A sound, a movement, a turn, a pause, a voice, a space. And later, those small details would become part of the evidence that helped investigators move from fear and uncertainty toward a name, an address, and an arrest. In the early morning hours of November 3, 1984, Lisa McVey was riding her bicycle home from work. She was 17 years old. The ride should have been ordinary. It should have been the final stretch between a late shift and the safety of home. But while she was on the road, a man abducted her. He forced her away from the street and into his control. Lisa was blindfolded, which meant she could no longer rely on sight. The world around her became sound, movement, temperature, and instinct. The road was no longer something she could see. It became something she had to feel. A turn to one side, then another. The speed of the car, the length of the drive, the change in road surface, the rhythm of traffic around them. Most people, in that kind of fear, would be overwhelmed by the moment itself. And Lisa was frightened. She had every reason to be. But somewhere inside that fear, she made a decision. She would pay attention. She would remember whatever she could. She listened to the man's voice. She noticed how he spoke. She tried to understand where he was taking her. She paid attention to the environment around her, even when she could not see it. The hours that followed were deeply serious and traumatic. Lisa was held against her will and seriously harmed. We will not describe those details here. The important part of this story is that she survived, stayed observant, and later gave investigators information that helped identify the man responsible. During the time she was held, Lisa continued to think carefully. She knew she might not be able to overpower him. She knew she could not simply escape by force. So she looked for the small choices that were still available to her. She tried to leave traces behind. She touched surfaces. She made herself remember the space around her. She listened for sounds beyond the room. She paid attention to details that might later help police understand where she had been. This is one of the most remarkable parts of Lisa McVey's story. She was not safe. She was not in control, but her mind stayed active. She understood that evidence could matter. She understood that memory could matter. She understood that if she made it home, she would need to bring something back with her, besides fear. Lisa also spoke to the man who had taken her. In dangerous situations, survivors sometimes use calmness as a tool. They may speak carefully. They may try to reduce the immediate risk. They may try to make the person harming them see them as human. This is not weakness. It is survival. Lisa did what she could to keep herself alive. She listened. She answered. She observed. She endured. And after approximately 26 hours, the man released her. He left her in a remote area and told her not to remove the blindfold right away. Lisa waited. Then, when she believed she could move, she acted. She was alive. She was free, and she had carried the details with her. The road, the vehicle, the voice, the room, the small clues that might have disappeared if she had not held onto them. The crime had begun with a man taking control, but it did not end with his version of events. It ended with Lisa coming home and speaking. After Lisa was released, she reported what had happened. This should have been simple. A young woman had been abducted. She had survived. She had information. She needed help. But in many retellings of the case, one painful detail appears again and again. Lisa was not immediately believed by everyone around her. Her story sounded extreme. She had been gone for many hours. She was young. And sometimes, when survivors come forward, people look first for reasons to doubt instead of reasons to listen. But Lisa stayed consistent. She repeated what she remembered. She described the car. She described the man. She described the place where she had been held. She described the route as best she could. She remembered that the man had used an ATM during the time she was with him. That detail mattered because it gave investigators a way to connect a timeline to a location. She also remembered information about the vehicle and the apartment. She had been blindfolded, but she had not been unaware. That distinction became crucial. Investigators began to understand that Lisa's account was not vague. It was detailed. It contained pieces that could be checked. It gave them something to work with. And once police began following those details, they led toward Bobby Joe Long. Long became a suspect in Lisa's abduction. Investigators obtained warrants connected to his apartment and vehicle. Evidence gathered during the investigation helped connect him to Lisa's case. Less than 2 weeks after Lisa was abducted, Long was arrested. The arrest did not only matter for Lisa's case. It opened the door to a much wider investigation. For months, authorities had been trying to understand the pattern of killings in the Tampa Bay area. Once Long was in custody, investigators examined whether he was connected to those crimes as well. Long was ultimately connected to multiple murders in the Tampa area. He later pleaded guilty in several cases and was convicted in others. His name became tied to one of the most frightening crime series in Florida during the 1980s. But in this episode, the center of the story is not Bobby Joe Long. The center is Lisa McVey, because without Lisa's survival and memory, investigators may not have reached him when they did. Her observations helped create a path. Her report gave police details they could test. Her consistency helped turn a traumatic event into an investigative lead. That is what makes this case so important. Lisa did not solve the case alone. Police work, forensic evidence, warrants, interviews, and legal proceedings all played major roles. But Lisa provided the living connection. She had been close enough to observe what others could not. She had survived long enough to speak, and she spoke clearly. A route, a vehicle, a location, a man, a timeline. Each piece mattered. The investigation that followed showed how powerful a survivor's account can be when it is taken seriously. A single remembered detail can shift a case. A single description can narrow a search. A single voice, heard and believed, can change everything. The abduction of Lisa McVey is a difficult story. It begins on a quiet road. It moves through fear and uncertainty. It touches the larger shadow of a series of crimes that had unsettled Tampa. But the reason the story continues to be told is not only because of what happened to Lisa. It is because of what Lisa did. She noticed. She remembered. She survived. She came home with details that helped investigators identify the man who had taken her. That is the quiet power of this case. Not the violence, not the fear, not the name of the offender. The power is in Lisa's presence of mind, in the middle of danger. She became a witness. She built a record out of sound and movement. She turned memory into evidence. And when she was finally free, she told the truth years later. Lisa McVey would become known not only as a survivor, but as someone who used her experience to help others. She went on to work in law enforcement and became a public voice about survival, listening to victims, and taking reports seriously. That part of the story matters. Because true crime often ends with the arrest, the conviction, or the final court ruling, but for survivors, life continues beyond the case file. There are years after. There are ordinary mornings after. There are choices made quietly, long after the headlines fade. Lisa's life did not end with what was done to her. Her story became larger than that. It became a story about courage without dramatics, about memory without sight, about a young woman who refused to vanish into someone else's crime. The road in Tampa was dark that night, but Lisa carried something out of that darkness. She carried the truth, and the truth helped lead investigators back to him. Thank you for listening. Tonight's story was difficult, but it was also a story of survival, careful observation, and the importance of believing those who come forward. As you rest, hold on to the gentler part of this case. One voice can matter, one memory can matter, and one survivor's truth can help bring light to a place that once felt completely dark. Sleep well.